Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Watchcastage. My name be Bandrew, and today I wanted to try a different type of video. I want to compare two watches and see which one comes out on top when we compare it on paper and once we put it on our wrist. So let's jump to the overhead camera angle and we'll start comparing the two watches. And here are the two watches that we're comparing today. First one is the Casio Duro with the new green bezel insert. This costs between $50 and $75. On the right-hand side, we have the Timex Navi XL Quartz. This goes for around $130, and if it's unclear to you, both of these are quartz watches. I do have the original strap for both watches right next to it, but I have replaced them both with a Perlon strap because I do prefer the Perlon over the original straps. The Casio is a standard Casio rubber strap, and the Timex comes on a single-pass fabric strap, which does feel like it will last quite a bit longer than the rubber. But as far as the weight of the watches on the original straps, the Casio Duro comes in at 93 grams, the Timex comes in at 71 grams. We also have quite a different diameter of the watches. I'm going to move these straps out of the way. The Casio measures in at 44 or 44.5 millimeters in diameter, so quite a large watch, while the Timex measures in at 40 millimeters, so about 4.5 millimeters thinner or narrower than the Casio. But the diameter doesn't tell the whole story. The lug tip to lug tip is also really important. The Casio Duro is relatively short at 47.6 millimeters, while the Timex measures in at 50.5 millimeters. You can see that the Timex is significantly longer, lug tip to lug tip. And on the note of lugs, Timex 20 millimeter lugs, Duro 22 millimeter lugs. Then the thickness of the watches is pretty similar. The Casio Duro on the left is 12.1 millimeters, the Timex 12.5 millimeters. I think that difference is going to mainly come from the slightly domed mineral crystal on the Timex. On the note of crystals, both of them do have mineral crystals on them. Also, since we have the crowns here, they are both unsigned. The Casio Duro has a screw-down crown, the Timex non-screw down. The next really big difference about the watches is going to be the bezel. The inserts are the same, they are both aluminum, but the action of them is quite different. Let me go ahead and move the Timex out of the way. The Duro is a 120 click unidirectional bezel. Pretty good action, especially given the $50 price. Nothing to complain about there. And the Timex is bidirectional, and it does not have any click to it. I believe it would be a pressure fit. It's a free-floating bezel, essentially. It doesn't have any locking mechanism there whatsoever, and that is the main difference between the bezels. Then as far as the registration of the seconds hand, I know it's going to be hit or miss and quite different from watch to watch, but both of these are extremely good. They hit nearly every single marker, and I'm impressed by both of them. But I've seen Timexes that do terrible, and I have a Casio Duro that does terrible. Also on the note of the seconds hand, the Casio Duro's tick is incredibly quiet, very difficult to hear. The Timex, quite a loud tick. I wouldn't say as loud as the Weekender, but you will be able to hear the movement. You will be able to hear the ticking from a few feet away, if that's important to you. Also, we should discuss the dials. The Casio Duro is a sunburst dial, and it has not applied indices, but seemingly applied indices, and it kind of mimics more of a classic dive style. It does also have that date window there. The Timex, on the other hand, is a matte black dial, and it does have, again, seemingly applied indices. I'm not sure if they are in fact applied, but this is more of a field watch aesthetic. It does have those nice markers, but it has that 24-hour ring in the middle, and the handset has a little circle to encircle the 24-hour military time there. So quite different aesthetics there with a field watch, I would say, and then more of a dive watch on the left. And the last two things that I can think of is water resistance. Casio Duro, much more effective, 200 meters. Timex, limited to 100 meters, doesn't have that screw down crown or anything. And accuracy, the Casio Duro again beat out the Timex. This was losing about 1 second every 2 weeks, so maybe 2 seconds per month. The Timex lost about 5 seconds in 2 weeks, so about 10 seconds per month. Again, this is going to vary quite heavily from watch to watch. This is just the 2 samples that I have that I purchased. And here is a quick lume comparison. You can tell both of the dials are very well lumed. All of the indices, all of the hands, including the seconds hand. The Duro does have a lume pip on the bezel. The Timex does not have any lume on the bezel. And as we let this run a little bit longer, you can tell that the Timex dial is fading very quickly, but the handset is pretty nicely lumed. I'm pretty happy with that. The Duro, it does seem to be more uniform across the dial and hands, but the hands are fading a bit quicker than the Timex. So there you go. That is the very quick lume test between the Casio and the Timex. And the last thing that we need to do is a quick wrist shot of both watches. This is the Casio Duro. Again, both of these are on Perlon straps because I prefer them. They are really cheap, so it's not going to be prohibitive. But you can see, with a 44 millimeter diameter, this should not work on my 18 centimeter wrist. I think that it does. It works really well. If I rotate around so you can see how it sits, pretty thin, not the thinnest, not the best fitting, not the best sitting, but it does work pretty well, especially given a 44 millimeter diameter. You would expect this to be hulking. It should dwarf my wrist, but it does not. It works really well, and with that green bezel insert, just looks amazing. And here is the Timex. I must say, I think this one looks really good as well. A bit more utilitarian feeling and looking. It doesn't have the same flash as the Casio Duro because the Duro has that sunburst dial and that really awesome green bezel. But this one does work really well on my wrist with that 40 millimeter diameter. The 50.5 millimeter long lug to lug does seem like it should be a problem, but it doesn't. It wears really nice because those lugs do curve down quite a bit. Let me rotate around so you can see how it sits on my wrist. Again, not the thinnest, but not terrible at all. Definitely a functional and pretty darn wearable size all around. So when we compare these two watches on paper, I think it's pretty clear which watch should win. The Casio Duro, because it beats out the Timex at nearly every single level. It's about half the price. It has a quieter movement, in my experience, a more accurate movement, also additional functionality with the date if you want it, shorter lug to lug, thinner case, screw down crown, better water resistance, lume pip in the bezel. And with all of that, you would expect me to say that the Casio Duro is the clear winner, everybody should buy it. But it has one main drawback, that really weird 44 millimeter case size. I don't know why they did that. If this was 40 millimeters, I know 44 millimeter watches can exist, but at this price point, if this was 40 millimeters, everybody should buy one. At 44 millimeters, it's difficult. It's just a bit too big for a lot of people. And the Timex does have a lot of drawbacks to it. It has that longer lug to lug, the lower water resistance, the free-floating bezel, the noisier movement, and in my experience, the less accurate movement, the non-screw-down crown, and twice the price. It should lose flat out, but I still find myself gravitating towards the Timex. When we do look at them side by side off of the wrist, I do prefer the Duro. But once they make it on my wrist, that's where the Timex wins out. So if you are able to pull off 44 millimeters, I think the Casio Duro is the clear choice. But 44 millimeters is really hard to pull off, and if you find yourself struggling with it, I do think the Timex is a good, affordable dive style watch at this price point. I won't say dive watch like I would with the Casio because 10 atmospheres, not really dive level. Also non-screw down crown and non-locking free-floating bezel. I think that could be an issue if you are actually diving with it. But for everyday use, more than functional bezel, more than functional water resistance, and more than functional accuracy. We're just getting really nitpicky here. So that is the conclusion that I've come up with. And that concludes the comparison and my opinion about the Casio Duro versus the Timex Navi XL quartz. The Casio Duro is technically a better watch. If they cram this into a 40mm case, it would be the greatest selling watch of all time, in my opinion, because this thing is so amazing looking, so functional, just all around an incredible watch. But the size keeps it from being that real perfect watch, in my opinion. Some people will still think it's a perfect watch, and that's perfectly fair. This is just solely based on my opinion and my experience. Let me know what you think of both of these watches in the comments down below. Do you agree with my conclusion, or am I way off base? You may also be asking, Bandrew, why is your stupid face on camera? I have a theory. I've been unable to monetize this channel because YouTube has said my videos are too similar. My theory is that YouTube is analyzing my videos and seeing that the majority of the frame throughout the entirety is just a blank white background with a tiny watch in the middle, and it assumes, okay, well, 95% of the video is the same. This is low quality, repetitive content. So I'm going to see what happens when I throw this ugly mug up on camera, which defeats the entire purpose of this channel, which was, this will be nice not having to actually be presentable. But apparently I will have to be presentable now. Okay, I'm rambling. This is not related to watches anymore. It's about YouTube and monetization and all that. I'll let you know what happens on future videos, and let me know if you like this type of video, I guess. If you're still watching this. If you are, you're amazing. You're just a real special kind of person. Real special guy or gal. Keep it up, champ. All right, I will talk to you on a later date. Thanks for watching. No pun intended. Bye.